Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening, and welcome to the Canadian premiere of Lulu Wang's The Farewell. Yes. Before we begin, I'd like to just acknowledge where we are tonight, whose land we're on. This is the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. And we're grateful to be working in this community and to support First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities by showing the works of Indigenous filmmakers here at TIFF. We are thrilled to present this film. I was able to see it at the Sundance Film Festival where it premiered. It stars Awkwafina as a Chinese-American woman who learns that her grandmother is dying and reluctantly goes along with her family's plan to keep it a secret. This story originated as an essay for an episode of This American Life in 2015. Lulu then developed it into a film that won the audience prize at Sundance, London. It is right now, at least most recently, at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's a figure that matters a lot these days. It's really been doing so well with critics as well. David Ehrlich on IndieWire wrote, "This film cleared my skin and did my taxes." What more do you want from a film? We are so pleased that Lulu, on a very busy tour, raising awareness about this film, has chosen to come to Toronto to show it to you, the very first audience in this entire country to see her film. Please join me in welcoming Lulu Wang.
These mics are always too short for me. Hey, Toronto. Thanks for coming out. This is so exciting. I want to thank Cameron and TIFF for hosting this. I want to thank VVS, our distributors, for distributing this film in Canada so you guys can go see it again or send your friends and family. Thank you guys for being here. This is really exciting. For me, it's always exciting to show it to audiences in different countries, just to see if there might be a different reaction or maybe the same reaction. So how many of you are here because you heard about it through a friend? How many of you are here because you saw the trailer? How many of you are here because you saw that our per-screen average beat the Avengers? Well, we did. We're only in 4 theaters, but still. We did. It's the headlines that count. Well, thank you so much again. It just means so much because I made this very, 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 very personal film, and I'm going to be here afterwards with Cameron to do a Q&A, so please stick around, and I hope you enjoy.
Lulu, thank you for the film, first of all. There's so many things that feel new about it, maybe shouldn't, but do feel new because we just don't see films like yours very often. And I wanted to begin by asking you if there were things that you wanted to create to show in this film that you hadn't seen in films before.
Yeah, I think that the language was one of them. This sort of multifaceted use of language, but also the seamlessness of it, that for them it's no big deal. They're just kind of transitioning as needed. And except for Billy, of course, when she's like, what's that word? Which also I don't think I've ever seen. I feel like I never see people on screen ask how to say something in another language. And I guess also, just people who are so fluid in both cultures. I find that I usually see an Asian person that's completely westernized and speaks English fluently and, whatever. And then, or I'll see Asian people being Asian. And you never see somebody who you're like, oh, they're able to hang out with Americans and tell jokes and be totally assimilated. But they also can go back to their family and speak a different language and just be a different way, play a different role.
So for that kind of world and that kind of lead character, you needed a particular kind of actor, I'm sure, and you found Awkwafina. Can you talk a little bit about the role that you wrote and then casting her in the lead?
Yeah, when I first wrote the role of Billy, I never intended her to be me. It was never like I was, recreating myself on screen. I wanted Billy to be a conduit, for the audience, and also just for any Asian American, immigrant American, anyone who feels caught between two worlds. She's this vessel that takes us through this journey of navigating her American culture and her family's culture. And so when I met Awkwafina, she was a lot more, well, let's say she spoke a lot less Chinese than I did. And so I was a little nervous about that. But she felt so quintessentially American, which is what I loved. I felt like, she's your typical New Yorker. And so her Chinese was limited, and I actually changed the role of Billy in the script to fit Awkwafina. I had people kind of comment on the fact that, Billy's Chinese is not very good. I had Billy kind of intentionally, say, how do you say this again, Dad? What's going on? What did they say? Those kinds of hints to remind us that she, while she understands some things, she doesn't understand all things.
There's something tonally about the film that really suits Awkwafina's casting as well, because we often know her as somebody who's just funny. She's done stand-up comedy. She can be very, very funny. But the film is not simply a comedy. There's a lot more going on there as well, and it's able to kind of walk a very fine line between the dramatic side, which is often quite devastating, and the comedy. Can talk a little bit about the tone and about what she brought to that as well?
Yeah, it's a lot harder to teach an actor comedy, like comedic timing, than it is to try to pull a dramatic performance out of a comedic actor. I think that's why so many comedic actors make very successful turns towards comedy, because I think comedians also tend to be fairly dark people. They use humor really as a survival mechanism. And that's certainly the case with Nora. She, told me that she grew up cracking jokes because her mother died when she was 4, and she was raised by her Chinese grandmother. There was a lot of awkwardness in her family. And so she realized that she had the superpower. If she could crack a joke, it would dissipate the tension. And so, of course, being the family clown, as her grandma recently called her, like the family entertainer, then transitioning into being the world's entertainer, she doesn't have a chance to use this other muscle, of which is that of vulnerability, that of connection. And in this film, when she was in China, when we were on set, she was often very uncomfortable, because I think if you're an Asian American person, you're going back to your home country or your family's home country, and you don't quite connect. It brings up a lot of different complicated stuff, which it certainly did for her. And she just, I could feel that she was like tense. And so I said, what's going on? She's like, I'm just very uncomfortable. I was like, great, because Billy's uncomfortable.
Use that.
I know it's a terrible thing for a director to say, like, I don't care, use it. Good. Because she wanted probably some sympathy or empathy. I was like, no, use it. But I was like, but Billy feels this way. And she's like, no, but you don't understand, like, the thing and this and the food. And I'm exhausted. And I feel things. And I was like, I know, so does Billy. Right. And so I said, I know that you're used to, like, immediately wanting to, your, like, instinct is to dissipate that tension by cracking a joke. And on this set, you can't. Like, I haven't written any jokes for Billy. And so instead, you have to, harness all of that energy, all of that discomfort, all of that tension, and channel it through Billy and let us feel it on screen. And so I think once that she settled into that, it was just so powerful and so seamless.
I want to go out to you and your questions, but before we do that, so get them ready and get your hands ready to put them up in the air and wave them like you just don't care. We have some questions from social media. I'm going to go to Twitter first. You're on Twitter.
I am on Twitter.
Okay. All right. So, I need to get my eyes on. Excuse me, people. Okay, here is one from Joanne, at Slow Mo Joanne. What surprised you the most about working with cast and crew across different languages, generations, and cultural perspectives? For example, immigrants plus first gens plus native Chinese.
What surprised me was that everyone became a family regardless of the language. And people who couldn't communicate somehow figured out a way to communicate, you know? And people would say, oh, that person we were talking about. I was like, what do you mean you were talking? Like, he doesn't speak English. You don't speak Chinese. And then, you know, my DP would think about it and she'd be like, oh, I guess you're right. Like, but in her head, she remembers talking to that person, you know, and maybe there was a translator, maybe there was a lot of waving, maybe it was like she would tell somebody who told him, and however it was, but in a lot of people's minds, they don't remember that, that the language barrier, they just remember people and communicating. So I think probably that. And then also, it didn't surprise me, but there was still a lot of more, it wasn't so much language, it was more cultural differences. For example, my production designer's Korean, but she went to AFI and lives in Los Angeles. And I met her on my last film, my short film. And so she came and she's shot many movies in China. And so she has a Chinese art crew. And sometimes the way she would talk to her was very stern, very like a tiger mom, you know, like one of the designers kept messing something up, like 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. She told her 3 times and then she messed up and she kind of was like, are you fucking stupid? And then the girl was crying. And so then it became this big drama because the producers were like, you can't call someone stupid on, you know, this is like an American set. You can't call someone that. And she's like, you know, this is just how we talk. Like, we've known each other for a decade. We always work together. Like, this is part of our relationship. She has to learn. And the girl's crying. And so we all go to the girl and we're like, you're crying? Like, I'm so sorry. Is it because she called you stupid? And she's like, no, because it's because I am. I'm just so, she's like, it's because I'm so disappointed in myself. Like, you know, Young just wants the best out of me. And like, I've disappointed her. And I was like, this is such an Asian moment, you know? My producers are still just like, you can't say those things, you know? And I'm just trying to like navigate. And I'm like, but she really, truly like loves her and they love each other. And this is part of the way they communicate to make each other better. And, you know, the American crew, they're like very nice to each other. But then at the end, they're like, see ya, man. Yeah, see you later. Bye. Right. And it's just
the connection
different.
Isn't there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. All right. Who's got a question for Lulu? We're going to start right here. And can we bring the house lights up a little bit more, please? We'll start right here. Do we have microphones? All right. No? Yes? You're close enough. You're right there. Yeah, 3rd row. You can go ahead and just call it out. You're reading it off your phone?
No, my question, I have it written right here.
Dude.
Do you want to?
Don't worry, I found it.
Okay, great.
Hi, I just want to say this movie, it reminded me so much of my my own memories with my late uncle. And I also wanted to ask you, what was with a subject matter like this, what was the greatest challenge in ensuring that it would still carry such a universal impact?
Well, I didn't necessarily like go into the storytelling and filmmaking thinking, how do I make a universal impact? You know, I think it's sort of like when you tell a story to a friend, you're not necessarily like, how do I make sure the whole world understands, right? You just you tell it from like a place that feels right to you and like a centeredness. And so, you know, I also didn't necessarily set out to make a Asian American film. I mean, I did, right? Like I knew in the back of my mind, but when I think about my family, I don't think of them as Asian or Asian American. I don't go around being like, meet my Chinese mother and here's my Chinese father. You know, I feel like those labels only occur when you're in a place and you're the other. Like when we're in America, they're like the Americans, right? But when we're in America, they're Chinese. And so, but to me, this is just my grandmother, my mother, my father. So, you know, I told the story from that particular place, not from the other in America and not from the other in China, just from a place where I'm me and these are my parents and they're frustrating and they're loving, and there's some stuff that's really confusing for me, and I'm trying to figure it out, and just from a centered place. And I think that's maybe perhaps why it's universal, because they're just people, you know.
Thank you. Let's go over here. Microphone is on its way.
Thank you. Hi, Lulu. Thank you so much for, making this great movie. I really love it. Like, it reminds me of my grandpa as well. But I do have a question to ask you. Is there any particular reason that you picked that city of Changchun as the home city for Billy?
Yes, because it's where my real grandmother actually lives. So we went back because, when we told her that we were making a film, we didn't tell her what the film is about. So we were making a film in China, and we were trying to pick a city. And she said, "How can you come back to China and make a movie and not highlight the wonderful Changchun and shed some glory and light onto our wonderful city, and also spend time with her?" And so it's the city where the story actually happened in real life, and it was the place where my family lives, so I could actually see them and they could come visit me on set.
Nice. Okay, we're going to go. Can we go here? Mm-hmm. Oh, do you see someone?
That guy's got the mic.
I do.
Pardon me. Sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, Lulu. First of all, just an incredible film. I want to ask, were there any kind of filmic references, like films or certain directors that you tried to emulate? I think I could maybe see a couple, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, who do you think? Who do you see?
Tsai Ming Liang or Wong Kar-wai a bit.
All the Asian directors.
Sorry.
No, I think it's really interesting. I love all of those directors, and I did an interview earlier where, of course, like all of these directors have an imprint in my work because I've seen their work millions and millions of times. But I have to say, for this film, I actually didn't look towards Asian directors because in so many ways, I don't see Asian American filmmaking as like a genre, right? And so I wasn't like, how do I make another one of what Ang Lee did, right? Or what Wayne Wong did. I was like, how do I express what I'm trying to express? How do I express this awkward humor? What are some movies that have given me the sense of like tension or awkward humor? So Mike Lee was a really big inspiration. I just really love that sort of comedy that he's able to do in a lot of very dark dramas. He's able to find humor.
Was there a particular Mike Lee film that you were looking at?
Secrets and Lies, of course.
Yes, right.
Yeah. But they're all so great, all of them, except Naked. I think that's the one.
I love Naked. What are you talking about?
I gotta rewatch it. I can't. I gotta rewatch it.
Rewatch it.
Yeah, I've seen it twice.
Okay.
I gotta watch it again.
Okay.
I know.
Thank you.
It's not a popular opinion. I'm sorry. No, please don't tell him. Oh gosh, this is recorded. Don't tell Mr. Lee. I'm so sorry. I love all your films. I think we're gonna meet in the UK. I hope we meet. I think you're presenting the Q&A. I love all your films. Sorry.
I think that was good. You saved it.
I saved it. Right? It's not like it's
good.
forever on the internet or anything like that, right?
Not at all. All right. Who's got the microphone now? Anybody have it? Okay. Let's go. I think there was a lady right here. Yep. Microphone's on its way.
Hi, I'm sure the Asian people in the audience appreciate it in one way, but I have to say that my mother came to Canada from Scotland 70 years ago, and this movie could have been my mother's story. Like, it's a very universal story, and I don't see that. And even in a common language like English, the way people in Scotland act and think and talk about things is not the way people in Canada do. And my mother had to bounce back and forth between the two cultures. I think you did an amazing job.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go further back. There's someone in the middle, but just please wait for the microphone.
I can yell. I'm a theater actor.
Woo, do it.
Excellent. Project.
Hi. Thank you so much for this film. long time now. So I
谢谢。
immigrated when I was very young too. So I wanted to say thank you. Oh my God. Okay. So I actually was interested about sort of the crafting of the film because, as we have just heard, it does reach universally, but there's especially very interesting moments, like specific moments that really spoke to me as a Chinese Canadian, and like for example, the one with like the bowl of water and the steaming, you're like putting your feet into hot water, or like the shot where there was one of the dragon dancers just like kind of like checking his phone with a cigarette. And my question is sort of like, how did those moments come about? Was your script like very specific? Was it very like detailed, storyboarded? Or and then my second question is just that whether you've talked about Chinese distribution.
I'll start with that one. We do have Chinese distribution already because we screen at Shanghai Film Festival, and so it'll be out in China probably early next year. And then like all of the specific details, some of it was in the script, some of it like continued to develop as I started prepping for the film. You know, the hot water bowl was just kind of something that it was a different scene before. It was like two different scenes. We didn't have time to shoot it. So we were like, how do we combine the scene? Okay, we're just trying to show that Nai is not well and she's coughing, but also maybe that just a little bit of texture of her life. And, you know, it just kind of was like, all right, well, maybe we'll seat them there and what could they be doing? And so it just kind of came about on set, and that's one of the reasons that I really believe you have to go in with a really strong plan, but also be willing to completely throw away that plan if the circumstances change and you need to like think on your feet. And like the dragon dancer, or whatever, the lion dancer smoking a cigarette, I had in the script a guy smoking a cigarette could not care less about this wedding. And then because we had this lion dancer, we were like, and he was just around, and somehow they accidentally booked him for the whole day. And so I was like, oh, he's around? Great, let's throw him in the shot. And like, he can be the smoker. It'll be way more interesting if he's just like hanging out in the back, you know?
All right, let's go right here. I think in the second row from the break. Microphone's on its way to you. And if there's someone in the balcony with a question, we'll come to you next. There's a couple of people up there as well.
Hi, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for this film. It's rare to see someone like me on screen being represented. I moved here when I was very young, so I related a lot to Billy and how she wasn't really connected to the Chinese side of her, but like still was. As someone who is in film, I was just wondering how it was for you to bring the story from conception into being, and was it hard to tell a story like this?
Yes, it was hard, especially in the beginning when I started pitching the story. I would tell people the concept, and I had a script as well. But everybody, what they loved about it was the high concept, was the comedy, and the first question I would get asked is this an American film or a Chinese film? And so it was a very confronting question because it's like, well, are you American or are you Chinese? Because this is from my perspective. I would say, well, I'm American. But, you know, it's kind of a trick question because I know what they're getting at, right? They're like, if it's an American film, you can't have an all-Asian cast. People can't be speaking Chinese and subtitled. You know, how are we going to market that to a Western audience? But when I went to talk to Chinese investors, they would say, if you want to make a Chinese film, the main character can't be Billy. Her perspective is too Americanized, and the Chinese audience is not necessarily going to follow. And so, yeah, it was definitely challenging to get people to kind of see what this film actually is, and that it is from a place of in-between, which means it's both and neither, but that it's really just a human story. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we're going to go to the balcony up here.
Hi, Lulu. You are so amazing. Thank you for the film. I have two questions. How many shooting days did you have? And as a director, what was your hardest day on set?
We had 24 shooting days in China and 2 days in New York. My hardest day on set was when we were shooting that conversation between Billy and Nai in a room with just white walls, and we had shot Grandma's side, but I could tell because my DP and I didn't really have a plan. We were like, it's a room. How are we gonna shoot this in a cinematic way? We didn't have a plan. We went in, we just kind of covered it. We shot it. And I could tell by her my DP Anna, by Anna's body language, I could tell by the framing of the shot that something was off. Like it just didn't feel right. And so I pulled her aside and I said, "You hate this, right?" And she's like, "Why do you?" And I was like, "It doesn't feel like the language of the film." And she's like, "I don't know what to do. Like, the producers are saying we're out of time. We gotta go. And we had already flipped everything over to shoot Awkwafina's side. So when we shot Awkwafina's side, first of all, like, we talked about it for a really long time. We locked the door and everybody's pounding on the door, like trying to get us out of the room. And we're like, we're thinking, which is a very hard thing to tell like your first AD. And we just said, we need time, we need space to think. And I said, well, I just seen this beautiful film, Ida. And if we have white walls, let's just embrace it, let's embrace the negative space, to embrace the isolation. So that's what we did. We shot Awkwafina's side with a lot of headroom, and we were like, this feels really good. Does it feel good to you? She said, yes. And then the producers came and said, it looks different than the other side. You got to get it the same so that we can cut. And I told Anna, I said, if we shoot Awkwafina's side the same, then they're going to make us use that in the edit because that's what matches. And also it means we're not going to have time to flip around and do Nai's side with the extra headspace. And now, meanwhile, this 70-year-old lady had already given this amazing performance, and we were about to tell her, I'm sorry, because we didn't know what we were doing. We changed the shot. You got to do it again. But that's what we did. I told Nai like separately, the Zhao, and quiet secretly, and she was like, all right, I'm in, I'm good, I'll do it. And then I told the producer, yeah, I'll get that shot. And then I just made everyone turn around and shoot Nai. And they were like, wait, what happened? What? And I was like, too late. We already turned it around. And so we kind of tricked them. But it was hard. It was hard to do that because everybody's trusting you, and you're in a very time, restricted, moment to like make these decisions.
That's really one of the lessons of filmmaking. With all the planning you do and scripting and just mapping out the whole film, you still have to think on your feet and make changes on the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh. All right. Was there another question up in the balcony? Yes? Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, I loved the music in the film, and I was just wondering, with such a rich musical tapestry that you created, what was the process with your composer and just designing the soundscape?
Yeah, we had a very short period to make the music. Alex Weston is the composer. He works a lot with Philip Glass, and I wanted to work with him because I knew that I wanted a classical score, but arranged for voice, for vocals. And so he has a classical background, and at first we were gonna take public domain classical music and just adapt it for voice. But Alex said, I really want to compose something original. So I said, great. And we ended up doing themes, like we did the Lie theme, and so we would find musical themes that we would repeat, throughout, but like different variations of it, and it gives it this canon feeling of like repetition, of things coming back, and the idea of the voices comes from, Greek choir, and ancient like tragedies and stuff with a Greek choir, where you feel the voices descending upon you. It's the voice of family. It's the voice of society. And so that choir represented for Billy, all of the voices around her telling her what she was supposed to do, what the pressures were. And then we also had a singer who did falsetto, a male singer doing falsetto, that represented this sort of awkward soprano. It's a high voice, it's a soloist, but there's something a little off about it. And so throughout the whole score, we played with the juxtaposition of this soloist and this classical choir.
You're a classically trained pianist as well.
I am,
so were you especially involved in the music for the film?
Yeah, I think I drove my composer quite crazy because we'd sit down at the piano and I would play him a song and I'd be like this, and he'd be like, what about that? I'd be like, well, it feels like longing to me, and he'd be like, it doesn't sound like longing to me. That's what you just played sounds very happy to me. I was like, no, what you compose sounds happy to me, and this sounds like longing. And it's like, how do you communicate music, right? That was what was so interesting. Do you go from this note to this note sounds like longing to me, but maybe to him it sounds happy, and how do you come together on, to understand each other. And so it was quite a process. We had very little time, but ultimately we did, and I was super, super, super proud of the music.
Okay, we've got time for just one more question. Unfortunately, I want to go to the back of the main floor. I see somebody there. I haven't. Yes, you're pointing at yourself. You. Yes.
Yes.
I think we still want to get a mic to you, but maybe you can start. A mic is on its way, I think. Does Nine know now?
Nine does not know. No, she's not seen the film. She still does not know.
Don't tell her.
Please don't tell her. That's all I got to say.
All right, we are going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. So I'll just ask you to please join me in thanking Lulu Wang for the
Thank
farewell. Opens tomorrow.
Please send your friends and family.
Thank you so much.